Hi and welcome to another Watch Me Work. This one's part 3 of the Fantasy Stiletto, Weeping Healthcare Angel. So we've looked at creating the stiletto base and also creating the angel's head. And this video really is looking at creating the rest of us. So as you can see here, I've attached a head to the stiletto frame. All I've done there really is just place a few more beads of the camouflage down the wire stick thing that I attached to help me hold her a little bit better, and use that as her neck. Cut that off and then attached her head with a bit of acrylic behind her head and at the bottom of the neck. Placed a couple of strings for a mask that go around her cap as well, just to keep that on there and secured. And now I'm just looking at building up her body, again based around a foil fool, just again to help with the weight. And pad her body out before I start working with the acrylic. So again, I'm going in with my Mystic Nails Cover Pink Camouflage and to tone in with the acrylic base. So I'm just building up bead by bead, blending. Again, as I say, I use this acrylic because it is so easy to blend through and it doesn't marble, which is fantastic for cover pinks. So yeah, just building away, smoothing over, making sure that there's no rough edges that protrude from the acrylic, just making sure everything's nice and smooth. This is going to be painted later on, so I want to make sure that it is all nice and smooth and easy to paint, no rough edges poking out or foil poking out. Need it all nice and paintable. So just building up a body shape, a upper body shape here. I've not put any arms in there because the arms are going to be covered by wings anyway, so there's no need to put anything in there that's not going to be particularly visible. So just building up her shoulders, keeping everything nice and blended. It's just a matter of keep going with this. I have speeded this film up because it does take a while to do any sort of fantasy work, especially how I do it, because I use very small beads and work quite slowly, quite precisely. I don't use a knee file very much in my fantasy work. I like it all to be very much built from the beads of the acrylic rather than popping it on there and then filing it back off again. So as you can see, there's more of a body shape there coming through. I wanted a little bit more of a V shape, so I'm just building those sides up to make sure that I've got a nice amount of acrylic on there for the body. There we go, whatever we do on one side we do on the other. Make sure everything's nice and even. And there, so okay, and then just a few more beads just to give the coverage on there. The one thing that I always like to make sure on my little figures that I have, if it's a male, I like to have you know, the six-pack muscle type sort of thing going on, and on the females I like to make sure that they've got the chest and the what do you call them, the collarbones in there to make it a little bit more realistic. So I'm just smoothing it all out, making sure it's all nice and paintable. I'm going to be using acrylic paint on here, so I want it all nice and smooth. So I'm just filling out her neck here. You don't want her neck to be too thick or too thin. I like to try and keep everything as realistic as possible, so all you've got to do is, if you think of or look at a picture of a person, you can see really the proportions of the body, you know, the alignment of the neck, the shadows, all that kind of thing. So I like to try and integrate quite a bit of that into my little acrylic figures. So there we go, we've more or less got her body sorted now, or the base of her body. Here I'm just starting to build up the shape of a frontage, for want of a better word. She will be clothed, you will be pleased to know, but I like to get the shape of everything underneath. I'll be popping her some clothes on, but obviously we as women have got certain parts of our body that you know, is a certain shape, etc. So I like to, as I say, keep everything all nice and realistic as possible. So now we've got a chest in there, I need to pop those collarbones in. It's always useful to have a look at, when I first started making these little figures, I looked at a lot of model photos. Black and white are really great for looking at because it shows the shadows of where light hits and shadows fall and that kind of thing. And it really helps you to hone in the different shapes that make up a human body. So just patting that all nice down, keeping it all nice and soft. There we go, so the collarbones are in now. So once we've got the collarbones in, now I need to put some clothes on. So I wanted to put her a bit of a tunic on, or something that looked like a bit of a tunic. So with tunics they generally have, or clothing, you generally have like sort of ripples that go through. So I wanted to make sure that I got that effect in her tunic neckline. So I'm just building up the edge of the tunic now with this piece of acrylic. I always work on foam paper on the shiny side, because then it's easier to then pick your acrylic up. And what you're looking for when you're looking at your acrylic is for it to go dull. It's got a polymerization process that it goes through, and when it's shiny it's all still very soft and you can't really pick it up as a whole piece. Once it goes a little bit dull and a little bit matte, that's the perfect moldable stage then. So that's where we can then get our brush under and pick it up and mould it. So that's really a collar piece to a tunic. Now I'm just going to fill in a couple of little bits and pieces where her tunic would fall. And you can't really see on the video there, but there's a nice little fold to her neckline there. So it doesn't look part of her body, it looks like a separate entity. So just smoothing that all out, making sure there's no rough edges, anything like that. And even though you're not really going to be able to see the back of her once she's completed. I'm a little bit of a stickler and I like to make sure that things are finished off well, so I just want to carry that tunic collar on around the back of her arm. I don't need to worry about the white blending into the cover pink because it's going to be painted anyway, so I just want to make sure none of that white bleeds into her chest area, because that will be on show. So here I'm just then smoothing out the silhouette of a tunic. Again, it's going to be painted, so it doesn't matter that it's in white instead of cover pink. And then again around the back, finishing it all off and making it all nice and smooth. You can see there that I finished her strings on her mask with a couple of little bows behind her head. There we go, and just finishing off a tunic shaping. So if you can hear some jumping around in the background, that's my little bunny letting me know that it's dinner time and he's wanting his cabbage. But he'll have to wait for a minute or two. So once we've finished building the tunic or shaping the tunic, we need to paint it. So I make up the same greeny blue colour that I painted a mask and a cap in, and I'm using here the Be Creative acrylic paints from Sam Biddle, and I've got the, I think it's sky blue, blue and green with a little bit of black in there, and it makes this nice medical green colour, blue colour. So I want to paint that all the way down to the tip of the stiletto, so it all flows through the nail. And being careful here just to make sure that it's all nice and neat, even though again you're not going to see it. It's just me being a little bit pedantic. Just painting it all through. It takes a little while. I tend to do a couple of coats with the acrylic paint, just so that I know I've got a good coverage on there, with a little bit of paint, shading as well. So just be careful around her collar. I want to make sure that I don't touch the skin part of the figurine. Just check it from all angles that you've got a nice coverage there. So yeah, just painting, painting, painting. Probably could have used a bit of a thicker brush, but I like my orange brush from Be Creative. It's a nice brush to work with. Picks plenty of paint up and still got a really nice fine tip. There we go, just making sure that I've got every little bit covered. Still going. Right down to the bottom there. Cover every last little bit. So then it looks like she's sort of, I don't know, melting into the tip. I don't know, that it's just like sort of flows from the figurine into the stiletto. And again, you can see there, now that we have that painted, you can see the effect of that collar that we made up separately. It stands out nicely and gives the garment a little bit of movement as well. So I'm just going in with the second coat now, just to shore up that colour depth. I don't want any sort of patchy areas or anything like that. This paint that I use from Sam, it's got quite a milky texture, and the reason for that is we can use it with the nail art pen. So it has got a more creamy texture, more liquidy type sort of texture rather than a thicker cream. So it does need a couple of coats for working on this kind of thing. So then once I've got my second coat on, I'll then go in with a little bit of shading, just to give it a little bit more depth around the collar. I'm just adding a little bit of black in there just to give me a little bit of a deeper greeny colour. Again, just being careful not to touch her skin. So yeah, it just gives it a bit more of a 3D effect. So once it's dried, it needs to dry thoroughly. And then I top coat with Matte and Go from Mystic Nails. It's a no wipe top coat, but it gives a matte texture. And the reason that I'm putting this on, normally I wouldn't top coat any of my fantasy work, but I'm going to be working on the wings quite close to the tunic, so I don't want the monomer on my brush to pull any of that colour off, so I'm just giving it a little coat of matte top coat to protect it, and pop that in the lamp. It's a good matte top coat, as I say, that it's no wipes and it's matte. You know, some matte top coats are a little bit shiny, whereas the Matte and Go just comes out basically matte. So once we've completed her tunic and protected it, and we then need to pop the wing bases on. Now the wing bases, all I've done with those is got some wire similar to the wire that I used for the head, cut a length and made it into a basic wing shape. Once I've got the shape sorted, then I just give it a little covering of white acrylic, and that is my base. That is what I'll be building my feathers upon. Just making sure that everything's nice and even and looks nice together. So I wanted these wings to look as though they were cradling and coming round and almost hugging the angels, so that's why I've got them crossing in the front. So then I need to create my feathers to build up the wing. So again, I'm using my white acrylic, and then all we need to do here is cut a few strips of a foam backing paper. I'm working on the shiny side again, and I'm just applying some acrylic on here in a feather type sort of shape. Again, working with small beads. I'll create a few together, and then by the time I've created the last fourth or fifth feather, the first one is ready to cut. So just pop them down, and then once they go matte, that's when we've got our moldable stage, and that's when I know if I start cutting into the feather to create the quills, then, is it quills? The feathery bits, you know, those. I don't know what they're called. Anyway, to create those, I just use a pair of nipper scissors and cut into it. And that, once we pull that off of the paper, creates your feather. There you go. And then you can make those feathery bits head in different directions and that kind of thing just by moving the paper around. So I'm taking them off the backing paper here. You can either put them directly onto the wing or pop them down and make a few of them all together and then apply them. It's personal preference really. Okay, so I've done the first wing. As you can see, I've built up a couple of layers of the feathers to give a bit of depth, and I've also put the feathers on the inside of the wing as well. So I'm just showing you on the other wing how I've created that depth of wing, as it were. Okay, so I'm going to pop some music on now, let you watch in peace, and then I shall see you again at the end. Okay. so I'm just finishing off the last little bits with her wings now. I'm just filling in any little gaps or holes in between the feathers, just giving it a smooth appearance and making it into a cohesive wing rather than a bunch of feathers stuck together. So I'm just smoothing out, making sure that it all flows nicely. As you can see, because I'm working close to that tunic with my brush, that's why I put a top coat on there. Okay, so the last thing to do now is to give her a Red Cross badge, just really as a nod to all of the health workers around the world, looking after the sick in these uncertain and testing times. So yeah, just making a little badge. I'll put a red cross on there and attach it to a tunic. But that is basically my weeping healthcare angel. I hope you've enjoyed these last 3 videos, creating a fantasy figure. I really love fantasy. It's a good way to stretch your skills, improve on your product control, that type of thing. So I really do recommend that everyone tries it, just to stretch you out a little bit. So yeah, just checking her over, making sure that I'm happy with her, and there we go, there she is in her entirety. So I've really enjoyed these last 3 videos. Hope you've enjoyed it. All the products that I've used are affiliate links are in the comments box. If you want to purchase any, please help yourselves. And I shall see you next time. Remember to like, subscribe and share if you enjoyed these videos, and there'll be plenty more to come. Take care.